the Freddie we know is only part of his story. Join us as we take a look at the untold life of Freddie Mercury. Freddie Mercury's untold story began in places that have since swapped names, much like Freddie did later in life. Freddie's story began on an East African island called Tanzania back on September 5, 1946. Back then, Freddie's home was called Zanzibar, and he went by a different name as well. Freddie was born Farouk Balsara to his parents who got their name from their hometown called Balsar in Gujarat, which is located on the northwest coast of India. The town where Farouk got his surname, Balsar, also had a name swap. Balsar became Valsad in 1974, after India reclaimed its sovereignty from British rule. There, Freddie lived in a modest 3-story apartment complex that was once a bustling place sprawling with energy. The Balsaras sent Farouk back to India for his education, where he attended St. Peter's boarding school in Pashgani. St. Peter's is a private, all-boys school that ranks in the top 10 boarding schools in India. These early years of Freddie's life had a profound impact on the future rock legend. For instance, St. Peter's school logo is a phoenix rising out of flames and holding an olive branch. This iconic crest might have laid the groundwork for Freddie's later work on the Queen crest. The phoenix itself could be representative of Freddie's own life. Once he hit stardom, people tried to tear him down for his sexuality, for his hedonistic lifestyle, for his clothing, anything they could get a hold of. But Freddie always rose from the ashes stronger than ever. The olive branch symbolizes peace, and Queen's music and message bridged so many cultural gaps, it's honestly an amazing coincidence that St. Peter's School uses these symbols. Some might even call it destiny. It was at St. Peter's that Freddie began his path to music fame. At just 7 years old, he started taking piano lessons. Out of all the instruments he could have learned, the piano was one of the best. Piano music can be easily transcribed to string instruments like the guitars and basses that would later become so vital to Queen's unique sound. The piano is also excellent for teaching music theory and other fundamentals that Freddie applied to his later career as a vocalist. Once Freddie was done at St. Peter's, he and his family moved to Middlesex, where Freddie came into his own as an artist. He would later meet Brian and Roger, and the rest is history. But Freddie kept much of his private life under wraps, even as he sang under the spotlight in front of stadiums and global television audiences. What were the parts of his story that he kept hidden from the world? Sure, there are lots of lesser-known facts, like how he joined a blues band called Wreckage, studied graphic design at Ealing College of Art, asked Mary Austin to marry him, and so much more. Freddie had a life outside of music. He worked odd jobs, he collected stamps, and he was a crazy cat guy. When Freddie joined the band Smile, which was renamed to Queen shortly after he joined, Freddie fit right in thanks to his worldly experience and his multiple interests outside of music. Freddie's bandmates were also an eclectic bunch. While Freddie held a degree in graphic design, Brian May was actually a PhD in both physics and astronomy. Maybe his background contributed to the spacey phasers on Killer Queen. Roger Taylor had training in a field that Freddie would have shuddered to think about with his extra teeth. That's right, Roger Taylor had studied dentistry. The last member to join Queen, John Deacon, also had a doctorate in electronics. That's a side to Queen you seldom see. They were all incredibly intelligent and gifted both in music and science. Maybe their ability to merge creativity and analytical thinking helped Queen become the powerhouse musical phenomenons they were always meant to be. Even though they had such strong established skills outside of music, and even though they all played in bands prior to being crowned Queen, they still had to prove themselves. Queen, just like almost every band in history, started at the bottom. Their breakthrough success came from their role as an opening act for Mott the Hoople, a British rock group with a following in the UK. Hard to believe back then, people wanted to hear a band that is almost completely unknown today instead of the fledgling group that would later rock the world. Mott the Hoople asked Freddie and company if they would join them for concerts in the United States. They agreed and headed across the Atlantic. Well, this international exposure laid the seeds for Queen's eventual success. Their tour ended early because Brian May ended up contracting acute hepatitis B right before their final show in Chicago, a critical city for developing bands. Brian was yellow with a sudden onset of symptoms and almost had to have his arm amputated. After doctors intervened, May thankfully recovered. Queen's reputation didn't suffer from the one absent showing. In fact, Queen's reign was just beginning. A lot of sources will say that Queen's first album was a flop, but was it really? Think about all the rock bands that release a debut, and think about all the bands that fall flat or never make it big. Queen's first album wasn't as successful as their later releases, and maybe it wasn't even a success by their own standards, but without it, we wouldn't have Queen 2 and the rest of their amazing discography. Their self-titled album released in 1973 didn't perform as well as they'd hoped, but maybe that's what the band needed to make Queen 2. It's fitting. When Roger, Brian, and Freddie got together, they were known as Smile. It was only later that they rebranded to Queen. Freddie's move to the UK opened the door for him to join Smile. Smile's rebranding to Queen became one of the most iconic names in rock history. And Queen's second foray into the rock world with Queen 2 was their shot at stardom. Queen 2 was when Queen found their successful formula. They aired on TV and started gaining a true fan base as they improved their commercial reach. Then came their third album and the single Killer Queen. It's a song about a side girl and sex work, and it spelled out the fast and wild side of Freddie Mercury while also showcasing Queen's style. And it was a huge hit for Freddie and the rest of Queen, topping at number 2 on the UK music charts and number 12 on the US ranking. Queen was at the top of their game in the early 80s, but they had been doing their unique thing for years by that point, and around that time, many of the members began working on side projects as well. Freddie started concentrating on his solo work in the mid-80s, which started with Mr. Bad Guy. Freddie's solo work also gave a unique look into his untold personal life. But just because Freddie wasn't with Queen doesn't mean his solo work was always solo. Freddie collaborated with a number of artists on these side projects, including Dave Clark. The pair worked on London's West End musical Time in 1987. This was a huge step for Freddie, who had dreamed of working with world-renowned opera singer Montserrat Caballé. The main track from this project, Barcelona, became the anthem for Caballé's home city, as well as the theme for the 1992 Olympic Games. Mr. Bad Guy was co-produced with German sound engineer and producer Reinhold Mack. Freddie departed from Queen's rock roots and refined the sounds that Queen experimented with on their 1982 release Hot Space. Hot Space was a huge letdown for fans, and it was a huge blow to Queen's popularity. But Freddie doubled down and made a blend of pop, dance, and disco on Mr. Bad Guy. Freddie said about his project, "I had a lot of ideas bursting to get out, and there were a lot of musical territories I wanted to explore, which I really couldn't do within Queen." The sounds reflected Freddie's nightlife, his party scene, and even the LGBTQ+ community at the time. Freddie took this project extremely seriously. It was both a labor of love and an incredibly difficult undertaking. With Queen, every member worked together to craft their songs. Freddie could have delegated tasks to other people for his side project, but he made sure he had a hand in every aspect of Mr. Bad Guy. He arranged the compositions, he was right next to Mac during the sound engineering, and he also performed and recorded piano, synthesizer, and vocals. Mac described Freddie's goal with his solo album when he said, "The songs are not trying to be anything else but Freddie. A lot of people were expecting Freddie to be catering to the audience. He didn't want that. He just wanted the songs as they are. I didn't try to get involved in the mixing, because he may not have wanted a lot of new ideas at that stage. It was already great, and I would not want to have gone in and made changes for the sake of it, like someone painting a nose on a Rembrandt portrait at the very end." So what were the songs about? Made in Heaven seems to be about Freddie's breakup with his first significant partner, Mary Austin. The song talks about painful memories, and a reality that is at odds with how people see him. In the song, people tell Freddie that it's made in heaven, and it's all meant to be. Freddie is paying the price of fame like he paid the price of his relationship when he told Mary about his sexuality. I Was Born to Love You features more lines about destiny and love. This could be Freddie pining for Mary Austin, pleading for another chance, just as much as it could be about a short fling that he wanted. There Must Be More to Life Than This is a song where Freddie is searching for meaning in the world while also still grappling with the loss of his one true love. This song presents an image of Freddie that connects with the album title. Freddie's heart was broken, and he went on to become a heartbreaker himself. This cycle was hard for Freddie, who felt the joys of intense romantic flings, but the heartbreak that led to a lack of trust, and ultimately, Freddie's own fear of commitment. Living on My Own is another intimate and revealing look at Freddie's untold life. It paints a more real image of Freddie than most people have ever known. The song tells us that Freddie's nightlife, his flamboyant and dominating stage presence, partially stemmed from his loneliness. Freddie revealed who he was to Mary Austin, and she rejected him. So, he hid parts of himself from the world. At home, he was lonely and heartbroken, but in public, he was the life of the party. The Queen shows a desperation and longing in Freddie that was at odds with how he portrayed himself in Queen. Keenly aware of his own public image, Freddie parodied himself in the rendition of The Great Pretender, originally by the Platters. Here we see a striking, honest look at Freddie's internal and untold life. Maybe the performer we know and love wasn't the only side to Freddie. Maybe he saw himself the Great Pretender. So why did Freddie choose the title Mr. Bad Guy for his first solo release? Well, he actually had a completely polar opposite title planned for a while. When discussing the album's title, Freddie said, "Basically, I was lost for a title, but as far as I'm concerned, album titles are immaterial. I didn't know what to call it, but I had what I thought was a very beautiful track called Made in Heaven, which seemed to conjure up an image of some kind. But to be honest, I'm not really worried about it. It's what you listen to that matters, not what the title is." It's likely that Freddie chose the title Mr. Bad Guy because of his promiscuity. While he loved to make love and he had a big heart, he only gave his true love to only 2 people in his life. That meant all the flings, all the hookups, all of his one-time dance partners at the disco, all the flirting at the bar, left a wake of broken hearts behind him. For all the people he met and then let go, they probably saw him as a sort of bad guy. It could also be all about Mary Austin. It's likely that Freddie struggled to come to terms with the reality that his sexual identity wasn't accepted by the person he loved and trusted most in this world. Maybe he saw himself as a bad guy in that context and decided to own it, to take the thing that broke his relationship and wear it with pride. If he was a bad guy for being bisexual, he was okay with that. Another fact that points to Mary's influence on Freddie's untold life came to light after he died. Freddie was with his second long-term partner Jim Hutton for 6 years when he died, but he gave most of his estate to Mary. He gave her Garden Lodge, a mansion in Kensington, and 50% of his privately held shares. Freddie was always generous. Over the course of his career, he gave away millions to charity organizations, which is another side we seldom see from the star. Most drug-using party-god rock stars aren't kind enough or selfless enough to donate, but Freddie always broke the mold. Mr. Bad Guy, Freddie's intensely personal solo project, reached gold status and peaked at the number 6 spot on the UK albums chart. And it was only one look into Freddie's untold personal life. Themes of identity are constant throughout the album, but Freddie's identity struggles went beyond his sexual identity as well. Throughout his life, he was seen as a British music legend, but he was born on Zanzibar to Indian Parsi parents. He lived in India for years, yet these were parts of his identity that he shielded from the world. Brian May said this about Freddie's name change from Farouk Balsara to Freddie Mercury. "I think changing his name was part of him assuming this different skin. I think it helped him to be this person that he wanted to be. The Balsara person was still there, but for the public, he was going to be this different character, this god." Even before he grappled with losing love because of his sexual identity, Freddie was struggling with his sense of self. Sure, his change to Freddie is iconic and should be celebrated, but there was a darker side as well. Back in the mid to late 1900s, when Queen was reigning over the rock world, Freddie felt like he had to whitewash himself to succeed in the music industry. He felt that different races weren't given a fair shot in the music biz, so he left his childhood, his roots, and part of himself behind. Freddie's life may have been made in heaven, but it was certainly bittersweet. What did you think of this glimpse into Freddie's untold life of heartbreak, loneliness, and identity issues? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to catch the next video, and we'll see you next time.